Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's another episode of Let's Talk Broncos. First draft show we're going to talk about. We're going to kind of get into some of the prospects. We're going to rehash last year's draft as well. And that's where we're going to start off with here, Frankie. But first, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, doing really well. As you said, it's draft season. It is upon us, which I think is, really where we shine. That's where we get in our groove, Joey. So I'm feeling pretty good. You're what, 10 days, 11 days out from getting to go down to Mobile. So I'm sure you're pretty hyped about that. Well, how are you doing in your countdown to that?
I am so excited, dude. I really am just like stoked about going there. I just have the whole roster pulled up, and I'm trying to, if I have the film on the guy, I'm going to try to at least have a baseline knowledge of everybody that's going to be out there is my goal. I've kind of worked through 50% of the list right now, and I do have some of my favorites, and we'll get into that before I go. I think I want to do that with you, Frankie, being a draft.
That's a good idea. We'll do a pre-Senior Bowl during after.
Yes, I think that would be fun. And we can kind of go through that and stuff like that. So that'll be good. But first, I want to get into with you, Frankie, last year's draft, and I want to go through what our expectations were with these players, and then kind of where it went out, and then just kind of discuss the pick as well and what we thought at the time. Obviously, the Broncos' first pick at pick 63 in the second round was Marvin Mims. What did you think of his rookie season?
So if we had to grade it, I'd probably give it about like a C plus B minus. And I think a lot of people probably take that as a lot of slander. But first of all, we've kind of said this, I feel like, when we talk about a lot of rookie classes, guys, it's too early to judge any of these guys. Anything I'd say about these guys, they still have a lot of time. Marvin Mims is like a 22-year-old player at this point. He was drafted as a younger dude. He's still got a lot of time to improve. Drew Sanders, Riley Moss, who barely even got the chance to play this year, guys like J.L. Skinner. These are not like final opinions on these guys. These are just kind of like relative to the moves that were used to get them. How did they kind of perform in their first, how 17 games as a Bronco? So yeah, going from there though, that being said, yeah, I'd probably say like C plus B minus for Marvin Mims. I think people will probably hear that and be like, oh, he was a Pro Bowler. I guess where I'm coming from, Marvin Mims was a second-round pick, and a second-round pick they had to move up to get. I believe that they swapped, like a fifth for like a seventh. So it wasn't like a huge move up, but they did end up sacrificing capital, used the second-round pick to go take Marvin Mims. And from what we saw from him purely as a receiver, I just think that we could have seen a lot more. I think a lot of people would agree with that, whether that's usage, whether that's the guys in front of him. I wish we would have gotten to see just a bit more out of Marvin Mims. I want to say out of all rookie receivers here, I can pull it up here in just a second, but I want to say he was like the 15th in receiving yards or something. And I want to say he was like the 7th receiver taken. Like, he was kind of right next to a lot of those guys that I think did end up falling to that 3rd, 4th round, such as guys like Tank Dell and Jalen Hyatt, and guys that I think I was a fan of in the pre-draft process that Denver wouldn't have had to sacrifice capital to go up and get. So I think on that kind of metric alone, I'm just going to drag down the pick a little bit. But there were exciting things as well. Obviously, again, Pro Bowl punt and kick returner. This is an explosive addition to have on the special teams, something that Denver hasn't had in a very long time. And then on the offensive end, we did kind of see it get going a little bit more late, like at the end of the season. I think the last game especially, or the last, maybe it was the New England game, when we got to see him used in more of those kind of underneath, kind of quick little, like, let's get him the ball and see if he can make a move. We saw him kind of use as a bit more of a gadget kind of clear out weapon, but we haven't really seen him be a true dynamic receiver yet. And I think that just that lacking, especially when you compare just the rookie seasons from receivers we're seeing in the past 3-4 years, especially this season, when you talk about, again, I mentioned him, Tank Dell, Puka Nacua, who we're seeing, like so many of these guys are coming into the league and creating impacts right away that I think it's almost impossible to just come away a little disappointed with Marvin Mims' offensive production in his rookie season. What would you say, Joey?
I would say I wish there were more shown from Marvin Mims. I think what I can do. So if I'm going to flip this into a positive, I think Marvin Mims definitely has a selling point, and he definitely has something he excels in. That thing that he can excel in, he excels at the NFL level also in, right? I think we can definitely say that now, and that's that he's really good deep route runner or a deep ball threat. When at the beginning of the season, when teams didn't know what exactly Marvin Mims was all about, he was torching teams over the top. That was something he was doing. So I think that is a selling point. That's something I can kind of put a check mark to. and be like, okay, Marvin Mims has a strong case here. But he absolutely needs to develop more. Coming out of Oklahoma, he didn't have a great route tree, and that showed up in his rookie season. He couldn't separate that well, and other things like that. He just wasn't that great in anything that wasn't a 9 route down the field. If I'm being honest, even some of the gadgety plays they gave him, it didn't work because everyone knew what he was out there to do. He was a 9 route guy, and he was going to be used in gadgets. That was Marvin Mims' game. So ultimately, I do wish that the Broncos got more out of him. I wish Marvin Mims had more in him as a rookie. I am looking forward to him continuing to develop. I think there is a lot of room to grow there, especially because he does have that one thing going for him. And it's a dangerous thing, and it could really, I think, compensate for some of the other things. Like, he doesn't have to be the best route runner in the world because he can do that one thing so effectively. You know what I mean? We see that with guys like, I don't know, DK Metcalf is the first guy that comes to mind. He's so good at running deep downfield. He's so fast. He's so big that really all he needs in his arsenal is a slant route, and he's an effective receiver because you have to worry so much about him just running deep. So I don't think Marvin Mims is that effective. It's not what I'm trying to say, but it definitely helps him compensate for that other stuff. Ultimately, I'm excited for him in the future, but I wish that he did more this season.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of in lockstep there.
Yeah. And I'd say, again, such a big part of this, as we're pointing out, is usage. I mean, he got 32 targets this entire season. That is not a lot. I mean, again, just for some of the underlying numbers, they are very encouraging for Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims was 3rd in all rookies for yards per reception. He was 3rd in yak. Like, he was a very, useful player in limited roles. I just think, for a pick that's the second, the first receiver we saw for Sean Payton, I think had a lot of hype coming in. We saw them make a move up for a team that has limited draft capital. I just think you would have maybe liked to see a little bit more. It is a little bit, I don't want to say disappointing, but it is a little bit tough when you see guys like Rashee Rice, you see guys like Puka Nacua instantly come in and have these 1,000-yard years. And these aren't guys that these teams had to go up and get. These are teams that were able to just kind of let these guys come to them. They ended up making them work out,
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And let's move on to the next one, though, Frankie. We have Drew Sanders from Arkansas. What did you make of his rookie season?
Probably another good example of just, we'll need more time, but I'd say another middling grade, probably around a C minus a little bit. You knew coming in that his usage was going to be a question mark. It was going to be interesting to see how he was deployed, especially with the fact that they had 2 serviceable to good to, pretty good inside linebackers with Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton, and arguably Jonas Griffith, who wasn't hurt at the time that they took him. But I think kind of another thing where we saw the flashes of a little bit of the explosiveness. You see the range, the mobility, but I think a lot of the warts that he had coming out, kind of the reasons that he ended up falling to where he did, kind of also showed themselves. He had issues tackling. He needs to be able to put on pounds so he's able to shed blocks better if they want to use him as more of a blitzer or even as a player off the edge. Like, I think it was kind of what you'd expect out of a player from his position and where he was taken. But I think also, and this goes for pretty much every rookie, again with Marvin Mims, showed on special teams, I think improved throughout the season. But again, another guy that kind of similar to Mims, I didn't love Mims. I disagree. Mims, I really liked how his usage developed throughout the season. Drew Sanders, I mean, we've talked about this. I think we got on a little bit of a rant about this last week. I didn't love how his usage kind of developed throughout the year. It felt like at the end of the year, they said, we don't have 4 edge players that we trust, so let's just force Drew Sanders to play there now. And I mean, I think we both agree that I just didn't see anything out of Drew Sanders that made me think we should keep giving this guy snaps there. And who knows? Maybe it is a situation where they think in a couple years he'll kind of develop into the player that they want to be at that position. But I think his future is kind of off ball, and I would have kind of preferred to just kind of let him deal with the issues there and let him continue to grow there. But, again, it's kind of hard to judge a lot of these guys when I don't think they got necessarily the opportunities in the role that they're going to be used in the future. Well, what did you think about Drew Sanders?
I'm kind of in the same boat. I always thought, I'm a huge Drew Sanders guy coming out of the draft, but I always thought he was a year away. I never thought he was ready to play year 1, and that kind of proved that to be true. I didn't like the edge usage really all that much. I wasn't a big fan. of that. I always thought, okay, this Drew Sanders guy, he needs to work on his strength. That's one thing he definitely needs to work on, whether it be getting off of blocks or making tackles. Like, strength was noticeably an issue for Drew Sanders, even in college. So why am I, as a defensive coordinator or whoever is making these personnel decisions, moving Drew Sanders as a rookie closer to the line of scrimmage? That didn't make sense to me. I thought that was a poor decision, and it was made out of a necessity, which is something Frankie has pointed out on this podcast. So I don't think that was a smart decision, and I don't think he should be there. Just kind of bolstering what you said. I think he's an off-ball linebacker, and I think that's what he's best at. I mean, he has had his highlights as an off-ball linebacker. It's hard to remember, and it's meaningless ball, but in the preseason, he looked really good, and people were excited about him as an off-ball linebacker this year. So I don't want to completely rule him out, but ultimately I would say, it's a C right now. It's not beautiful. It's not looking great. I think he can develop into something, but as a rookie, he didn't look that good.
Yeah, and just to perfectly highlight this, I've got his snaps right in front of me. He played 126 snaps on the defensive line and 110 at off-ball linebacker. Not my favorite usage of him, but again, it's understandable with what ended up happening with Frank Clark and Randy Gregory with this season, with them kind of just needing to find bodies at that position. It's just, again, one of those things where I would have liked to just see him kind of developed in one spot. You talked about this last week. It's hard enough to learn one position in the NFL. It's way harder to learn two. Just focus on a guy. And I think kind of the main thing, and maybe this is kind of what they wanted to figure out, and I think they kind of got their answer. This isn't me trying to take away from Drew Sanders. This isn't a Baron Browning situation where he has this, Baron Browning has a lot of bend and a lot of traits for pass rushing that kind of weren't really unearthed or weren't really utilized as well at Ohio State. Drew Sanders can get after the quarterback a little bit. He's pretty decent at rushing from the interior, but he does not display the same level of bend or elite ankle flexation or ability just to get around the corner as a pass rusher, I think, that you want to see from your edge spot. So I'm pretty out on the Drew Sanders edge experiment. Obviously, with a defensive coordinator like Vance, you're going to move him around a little bit. You're probably going to get some snaps of him off ball, but don't have him be like one of your 4 edge players, please.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And next up, we have Riley Moss. Riley Moss, traded up for Frankie. I don't think any of us, I went back to try to find a Tank Dell take you had on a podcast. I couldn't find it, but I was re-listening to our draft show, Frankie, that me, you, and Zach had right after the pod. And none of us were a big fan of the trade up for Riley Moss. So what do you think now? Did anything change? It kind of, to me, it just feels like, man, if you felt so good that you had to trade up for him, why weren't you playing him at all? Especially when Moreau, he was fine. He was doing okay, but it wasn't like this guy's a stud out there. He wasn't a replaceable piece. I wanted to see more of him, and that kind of leaves that question mark in your head where it's, why didn't he play?
Yeah, and you not even just talk about the outside corner spot. Maybe they don't see him as an outside corner. Okay. You didn't think about playing him over Usain Bassey early in the season when Kareem was missing, and then Caden got hurt. There was never any Riley Moss at safety. We just did not see the guy this season. And again, it's just this wasn't something where again, the Marvin Mims trade up, it annoys me because of where the team was at. But at the end of the day, it was they did a pick swap. The Riley Moss trade up, they gave up a third last year and a 3rd round pick this year. That 3rd round pick this year would be wonderful. Me and Joey would have a lot of fun and having an extra 3rd for the team this year.
You're not lying.
Considering where the team is at roster-wise. They are going to need to find these diamond-in-the-rough valuable pieces, and they are now lacking a very valuable, top 100 picks are gold in the NFL, and they gave up 2. So, there's, I forget what the exact or what the name of the thing is that they have, the draft trade grades or whatever. They have the draft pick value chart or whatever. If I was a guessing man, I would imagine that the 2 3rd-round picks Denver gave up probably equated to around a 2nd-round pick in value. That's a guess, but that's what I would assume. So you spent a 2nd-round pick on a guy at a valuable position like corner where, at the end of the year, he was getting some dime snaps. But, I posted it this week. He played 3 outside corner snaps. 3. I could trip through the stadium and accidentally play 3 snaps. You know, like that's crazy. In an entire season to only play a dude 3 outside corner snaps. And I don't want, again, this is another guy where I'm not trying to take away. He did some nice things on special teams. I highlighted throughout the year how special he was growing as a gunner and was an exciting player to watch. But it's just another thing where it's like, man, this is a team that has really needed to be smart with how they're spending resources, and they continue to be dumb with how they're spending resources. And that's not even getting into the fact that, like, you know, like, not saying that corner wasn't a need, but like they're burning 2 more picks on, or they're burning more picks and more capital in the secondary, where I've highlighted this a ton. It's a big gripe I have with George Paton. George Paton's invested a ton into this secondary. And to be honest, most of the secondary outside of PS2 is unchanged since he got here. They kept Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons as the starting 2 safeties since he got here. He didn't bring in either of those guys. How many draft picks and undrafted safeties has George Paton got in? We haven't seen them play. You know, like it's just crazy to me. So, like, yeah, I think the Riley Moss pick.
Okay. Oh, you mentioned that, Frankie. Here's the question I want to ask you. Do you think that Riley Moss is an outside corner? What do you evaluate him as?
Yeah,
you think he is an outside corner, or do you think he's better fit at safety? I know Zach has been on this podcast during draft time, and he said maybe nickel corner. Where did you evaluate Riley Moss being as a rookie?
I think he's an outside corner, and it's so funny because we talked about this after he was drafted. I like his fit in Vance's defense. Vance plays a lot of these, you know, single high coverages where you're leaving your second corner kind of on an island a little bit, and Riley Moss did that a lot at Iowa. Like, he was drafted. Like, I didn't hate the player fit on the team. It was just, again, it's like so to answer your question, I see him as an outside corner, and I do have faith in his development next year, especially if they're able to retain Christian Parker. So, like, again, this is another one of those way too early grades, but like right now it feels like we all saw how Fabian Moreau is playing the last few weeks of the season. If you can't count on your guy that you spent the equivalent of a second-round pick to go get, to just get like 20 snaps over him in the final week of the season that doesn't matter, that's a problem. That's just straight up a problem.
Yep. I totally agree. I think that there's something to it where Vance doesn't like playing his rookies. I don't know what exactly all that is. But that I think that is something. If you go down the list of players he's drafted, it seems like he doesn't really like playing young players, which makes it even more confusing as to why someone like that would maybe advocate for a trade up, right?
And
I'm not going to sit here and pretend like coordinators don't have influence on their side of the ball and who they draft, especially when the coach is an offensive coach. The defensive coordinator definitely has a lot of influence on that defense. The personnel they bring in, what was Vance's plan for Riley Moss? That's what I would like to know. When he drafted Riley Moss, what was the plan? Was it to sit a whole year? Okay, then why are we trading up for him? If it was like, what was the plan? Can somebody explain to me the plan for Riley Moss as a rookie? That would be great. I wish somebody would that's one of those questions that I wish someone would ask in a press conference.
Yeah. And we should highlight too, like, a big part of this is Riley Moss did get hurt. He missed like the whole rookie camp preseason period. Like, he did miss a lot. So a lot of that plan did get like shifted, but I completely agree where it's kind of like, man, again, you've invested a lot of capital, and now, like, I mean, we'll talk about when we get to this mock draft. People are still, oh my God, that voice crack, that was intense. People are still mocking Denver, a cornerback too, because we've spent all these, you know, Damari Mathis, you know, for maybe Damari Mathis turns down in year 3, but I think a lot of us are maybe a little, like, I am probably thinking that Damari Mathis is more than like, I don't know. Damari Mathis probably isn't a lock to make the roster next year, you know? So I think when you talk about he's a 4th round pick, you know, and these aren't super high value picks, but guys, you look around the league, other teams are playing their 4th round corners, you know, like corner is one of those positions where like you find day 2 and day 3 corners and they can play for you. I'm not saying they have to play elite. I'm not saying they have to play 800 snaps a year. They should play. To have a guy that, again, I'm going to keep saying it, you spent the equivalent of a 2nd round pick on, play 3 outside corner snaps. You can't get around saying it's concerning.
1,000%. Let's move on and get into the next ones. And I think we can kind of speed through these ones, Frankie, because I don't know what else. There's not a lot of evaluation that could go on. But 6th-round pick JL Skinner from Boise State. There was a lot of excitement around this pick at the time. People thought he would be picked higher. Obviously, he wasn't picked that high. Ended up being a 6th-round pick, like I said. Big, tall, physical safety, but we didn't see much of him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect example again, and it's another one where it's like this team was dealing with safety injuries at some point, and we still never really got a chance to see him. I think we did end up getting some special team snaps, but I mean, another one, too early to tell, 6th-round pick at safety. That, again, this was a guy that they drafted, a guy that I forget what his injury was. I think it was a broken collarbone. It wasn't like one of those like injuries that's going to super hard linger into the rookie season, but it is probably one of those things that he was probably more focused on recovery for the early part of camp as opposed to being in true game shape. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't want to, that's another one where it's like, there's nothing to really grade.
Yeah. There's not much for me to grade there either. I'm still kind of excited for him. I mean,
yeah,
you spend a 6th-round pick on the guy. If he doesn't turn out to be anything, he doesn't turn out to be anything. Like I hope he does. I think George Paton has to hit on some of these guys at some point. But you're not banking on any of these guys becoming.
He's a perfect example. Sorry, just to like when I talk about my plan of if the team was to really go into a true like we're going to eat it all next year and we're going to have a lot of day 3 UDFAs playing next year, like the Rams did this year, like the Buccaneers did, like the Packers did. He's a guy I would love to see. Like how a defensive like him, DTY, DTY obviously didn't look great in the Dolphins game, but he's a guy that's been great on special teams and a guy I would enjoy getting to see just to get a little bit more run at safety. Maybe PJ Locke makes a comeback. Caden Stearns, like there could be a really young, fun group of safeties. You throw another day 3 UDFA in there that like, I'd just be interested to at least get to see these guys because we just haven't seen them,
Yeah. Well, one thing I do have to say about this actually is JL Skinner, I don't know if you like the idea, like you're getting a talent there. I totally agree. The scheme fit is kind of weird to me. Do you think JL Skinner is a split safety type of safety? Like coming out of college, I thought he was more of like a J-Ron Curse type of guy.
That's what I was going to say. I think that's what his role was probably going to end up being.
Like it's a weird fit. I don't see him covering a back end of a defense. That's not really where I see him. I see him doing it sparingly. At least, I think closer to the box. I don't really see
what I was literally gonna say. We've seen Riley Moss we saw Riley Moss start getting those dime backer snaps towards the end of the year. I would have loved to see JL Skinner getting some of those. Like I think that what you just said is exactly what I like to see him. Let's get him close to the line of scrimmage. Let's man him up on like a slot or a split off tight end or an on the line of scrimmage. Or on the line of scrimmage tight end on like a 3rd down. Hopefully he can man up and cover a body, or let's have him like spy the QB. Maybe you send him after the pass rusher. Just like I think the way you described it is perfect. That's how I envisioned him being used too. But I do think that has a place in this defense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Hey, if you can figure it out, you can figure it out. Then last, Alex Forsyth from Oregon, the center. Some people were projecting him to start this year. I always thought that was super silly.
Yeah, he might start next year.
But who knows? Maybe he does next year. Yeah, Lloyd Cushenberry is a free agent. Frankie, you've been kind of vocal online where it's like the Broncos might price themselves out of this one with his improvement this year. So, yeah, he could be playing next year. What do you think about it?
I think, again, nothing to really grade from this year. But, again, there's the chance he's starting next year. I will say, though, I did a little bit of, looking. So, Lloyd, like you said, I do have my gut tells me that Lloyd played so well this year, which good for Lloyd, that he's probably priced himself out of a Denver contract and wants to see what he's going to get on the open market. He's still 26, and he just turned 26. He's very young. Just put in his best season. He fits into zone schemes, which are obviously look at the playoff teams right now. 80% of them, I think, are running, a Kyle Shanahan zone type offense where it's he will fit really well into a system like that. So I think Lloyd is probably going to end up getting a decent contract. But one thing I noticed, there are actually a decent number of true have been starting centers, available centers on the open market this year. I think there's 6 or 7, Aaron Brewer, Andre James, Connor McGovern, Tyler Biadasz from the Cowboys, Connor Williams from the Dolphins. There's 7 starting centers. So, and with how the center market usually goes, it wouldn't shock me if a couple of those guys only end up getting a 2-year, $8 million contract.
Yeah.
And I think Sean Payton, they're not gonna have a lot of money to do this year, but that's the type of deal where I would be all for it. Especially if we're talking about we want to have an offensive line put together for our possible next quarterback. get a decent center. That's not expensive. You can make a 2-year, $8 million contract split over 2 years. Easy money. Like centers just simply don't get paid that much unless you're literally a really, really high end guy that I think Denver can just kind of let the top 3 or 4 get their contracts and then just kind of catch whichever one slips and have them compete with the Wattenberg or Forsyth.
I agree. I don't have much to say here. I mean, there's nothing to evaluate from his.
Only other.
There's nothing. Like, I don't know what to say. He was a 7th round draft pick. He made the team. That's an accomplishment. So yeah, that's good. That bodes well for his future. In the press conference, they said that they view him as a future starter, which is like a huge deal. That's something to note. But that's about it. We didn't really see it.
Did just George Payton say that? I didn't fully listen to it. Did George Payton say that, or did Sean Payton say that?
George Payton said that. George Payton said that about him, and I think it was Drew Sanders.
So that's I took a little George Payton saying he's going to be a starter, but I didn't hear Sean Payton, who's the coach, say that. Sorry, that was just like I remember like reading that and being like, did Sean say it?
I know that's why we need I'm advocating for more O-line coach press conferences. That's something we need.
Yeah. And I guess the last rookie is pretty much Jaleel McLaughlin. Like, what were your thoughts on Jaleel? I mean, he's an undrafted, so he's found money.
Yeah, I mean, hell of a player for the Broncos. It's an undrafted free agent. It's an A+. You usually don't find players like this undrafted. It's very, very, very rare, and he's a contributor. He's not just a guy that made the team. He's a guy that came in and contributed year one and was good in his role. Is he a tell? Yes, but, I mean, you got him as an undrafted free agent. I don't know what people expect from the guy. He came in. He did well in his role, and that's kind of what I want from him. Anything else on top of this, if he continues to develop and continues to become a better player, it's icing on the cake.
Yeah. No, I mean, just when we talk about this run game, really wants to be multiple and be able to, run a lot of different concepts and a lot of different schemes. Jaleel McLaughlin is the only running back on this team I truly trust running in his own blocking scheme. He has very good vision. Like, I mean, that's just a trait of his. He was able to kind of carry over from college, his vision cutting back and finding holes when the line's kind of, sifting to the right. He's really good at that. And that's kind of something we saw Javonte and Samaje that they've kind of struggled with their whole career. So like for a running game that wasn't good, I'd say he was probably one of the main reasons that it was able to not be literally one of the bottom like 4 or 5 units. So yeah, I think Jaleel McLaughlin, again, great found money, was able to make some plays in the passing game as well too. We saw him work in the screen game, and towards the end of the season, it's funny, probably the Broncos' best like trait this year. This is gonna sound so weird. All 4 running backs were pretty good at blocking on third down. Like their top 3 were great. Michael Burton would be their third down back. Fucking great blocker. Samaje, great blocker. Javonte was putting dudes in the dirt. And towards the end of the year, Jaleel started picking it up as well. So
that could be huge for him too, by the way. That's
massive. Oh, absolutely huge. Massive. Because that what we're talking about with the tell thing, with when he's in the game, he's like 80% of the time or 90% of the time, he's probably running a route or getting just a straight up toss. And on those routes, he's likely getting targeted. Like that's just kind of how he's been since he's been on the team. So being able to have him be in on those third downs to just be a blocker, and like blocking is so much effort, where like just seeing the willingness for him to be able to go in there and put his body on the line to absorb a hit for Jarrett Stidham, who was the quarterback he did it for a couple of times. Like that's huge. That's huge for his career. And so, yeah, I liked Jaleel.
Last point on him, he has a couple special traits that like kind of like Marvin Mims, where it's like if you can continue to build on that, you have this that can go for you right now. Like you're going to have a career in the NFL based off these 2 things, and that's vision and speed for Jaleel.
And that short area quickness too. I mean, he has that like –
You're right.
It's kind of like – it's funny because it's like Phillip Lindsay, like the way he – I call it like slalom skiing, like the way he bounces in between blocks and he's able to laterally move. Like this is very clean, like he's just a very clean runner with the football. Yes, I am Frankie. I am the one with the glasses. But yeah, he does have some very like just explosive fun traits that makes him a very useful piece in the running back room that kind of doesn't have, I'd say, that a lot of guys that possess that true second gear and are able to get to that second gear quickly.
Shout out to everybody in the chat making comments. Shout out to David Glassman. Shout out to Strez. He has a great YouTube channel too. If you guys want to go check that out, it's fantastic. I'll link it after the show. And then Flarn says, "I'm enjoying this." Shout out to you, man. Hey, thanks for joining us today. But let's move on to the next topic. We went through last year's draft class. I kind of want to talk to you, and it's the title of the show. Who should the Denver Broncos select in the first round? 12th pick. Frankie, do you want to pull up that screen so we can kind of go off of that? But I have a few names I kind of want to go here. I don't know. Guys, read in the comments if you guys can read this or not. If you guys can't, just let me know. But we're at the 12th pick. I just kind of want to read through some of these names and even some of the guys that already went, maybe. I don't know. Who's an interesting name on here?
So in the top three, we had the top quarterbacks go. Malik Neighbors went over Marvin Harrison, but whatever. So I'd say this looks like a pretty – so actually it's funny because we were talking before the show about how there could be a corner going early and all these things, and it did end up happening. But here's what we got for available prospects right now. Looks like kind of, I'd say, what we'd expect, like 90% offensive players getting selected. There's so many good offensive prospects in this year's class, whether it's quarter, and they're at the premium positions as well. Offensive tackle, quarterback, receiver. And then you also talk about Brock Bowers, who's kind of just a do-it-everything weapon, you know? So where do we want to start? You know, we're at the 12th pick. Vikings just ended up taking Nate Wiggins. How would you feel about Jer'Jon Newton? Let's start there.
I would kind of hate it. Not my cup of tea. I won't lie. Frankie and I disagree huge on this guy, and I think he's a good football player. I think he has some things like that are really special about him. That short area quickness from an interior defensive lineman is really good. And I need to go back and revisit his film. He was one of the first players I watched, and I walked away like, is this guy really being mocked in the top 15? And it's just size related. Like, he's not my cup of tea in that realm. I want my guys up front to be bigger, stronger than Jer'Jon Newton is, if I'm being quite frank. I think it's more rare to find a Jer'Jon Newton type workout in the NFL than it is these other types where I kind of know what they're getting. And also it's easily and more easily translatable if I find I'm going to go to the extremes of the situation, right? But if I find a Dexter Lawrence type of mold, you know what I mean, than a Jer'Jon Newton, I know what I'm getting there, and those traits are super translatable. I'm not sure with Jer'Jon Newton. I watch it, and I'm like, okay, can he withstand in the run? Is that something that he can do? And I really have to actually wrap my head around that. That's not a thought I had with these other interior defensive linemen that I typically see drafted in the top 12. So I do really like him, but I think later. I don't think right now. I'm not the biggest fan just because of what his strengths are. Pass rushing guy, really explosive, but small. I think length issues are something that pop up, and I kind of struggle. Can he withstand a double team in the NFL? I don't know. Like, these are questions I have.
Yeah, no, I mean, you completely nailed it. I'll be honest. So I love Jer'Jon Newton, Johnny Newton. Let me make that clear. He would have probably been my interior defensive lineman one last year if he would have came out, and then this year he had just another really good year. But what Joey highlighted is very true. He's a player that does not have elite length. He doesn't have elite size. He's probably going to clock in around like 295, maybe just scraping 300. So, like, I completely agree. Here's where I disagree. He is a guy that I've kind of just tried to, I think, and this might be too much of an overcorrection for me, where I'm just trying to trust the tape on players a lot more. And he is truly a guy that when I watch this Illinois defense, and especially if you remember them last year, they were filled up with incredible talents, incredible NFL pedigree. He is just one of the most disruptive players I've watched. He, on a down-to-down, play-to-play basis, is constantly in the backfield. He blows up blocks. His hands are incredible. His technique is really good. And as for, the size issues, you're right. He's probably not a guy that's going to be shifting to like shading on one text, or he's not going to be playing nose for you, but that's fine. I don't think that this is a pick that Denver's making to say we need to upgrade our nose. I think this is a pick that says we found our 3-tech for the future. This is truly a defensive lineman we can pair with Zach Gallen, who I think kind of I think when you talk about the combination those two make together and Zach Allen being more of what you're talking about, more of a prototypical, I can stand up to a double team type of guy. And for a team that still, I think, will have Mike Purcell under roster next year, I just think the fit is so fun. But I would agree that I don't think that necessarily Jerjan is a top 15 talent. But the reason I'm okay with it is because when I look at all of the defensive prospects, I think he's still my favorite. Like his tape is just so explosive. It's a very fun player to watch that I can't get him out of my brain. So I'd be okay with it. But like you said, I don't think he's probably not in my top 3 for where that pick would be, especially if we're looking at the list right now.
I have a question for you. Have you watched the Texas defensive lineman?
Yes, it's so funny because yes, I was talking to Nick Kendall about him the other day. Oh my God, Banks, not Banks.
No,
Murphy, Byron Murphy.
Byron Murphy.
Second.
How far off is Byron Murphy from Newton? Because I watched him yesterday for the first time, and I almost it's damn close. Yeah, I think it's damn close.
I see them both as top 25, top 20 prospects.
Okay. Byron Murphy will be at the Senior Bowl. He has a really good chance at propelling himself, I think, closer to Newton after a good showing there. Because right now, I'm not seeing much love for the guy. Even the Washington game, he was tremendous. Texas has really good defensive linemen, man.
They have, and they're deep too. What's interesting about Murphy compared to Jerjan, sorry, I completely did not mean to cut you off. I did a little bit. Good. But so they have very comparable, especially if you look at the numbers. And I mean, it's funny when I'm talking about this play-to-play stuff. But Jerjan played, I think, probably 700 snaps each the past 2 seasons, which is a pro for me because, I mean, again, a lot of times when you're projecting these defensive linemen, especially if we're talking about another Texas guy like Tavondre Sweat, who you're maybe worrying about translating to the NFL and playing 500 snaps. But anyway, Jerjan Newton, he played 750 snaps each of the last 2 seasons. I want to say Byron Murphy was around 400 or 500, but again, they produced around the same amount. So Byron Murphy, I completely agree. A very explosive player. I think his testing is going to be really important to see, not even just to see, but I think that's going to be a huge thing for him. If he has, one of those explosive 999 RAS days, along with film that looks as good as it does in the limited role, I completely agree. He could be a guy that kind of slingshots himself even past Jerjan. But yeah, just for the time being, I still like Jerjan tapes better. And I mean, yeah, as Cooper said, that Texas D line, man. I mean, I just mentioned him. Tavondre Sweat, excuse me. If Denver's nose situation is, let me go off on this is a little side question for you. Would you be interested in them possibly looking at finding the nose for the future behind Mike Purcell?
Without question, yes.
Yeah. I'm a huge, I want to. Mike Purcell's awesome. Kicks so much ass. Very underrated player in Denver the past.
And I'd have him back in almost any scenario.
Yeah, I would love. And this isn't me saying get rid of Mike Purcell by any means. This is me acknowledging Mike Purcell is 34 years old, and it's probably smarter for Denver to think about the future with where they are right now than to kind of continue to hope that the mid-30s defensive tackle can kind of be their nose for the next 3 to 5 years. I think. So that's kind of where I was going to ask. Say Tavondre Sweat was available at 76. Would you consider that pick?
Again,
one of the other nose tackles? I know there's a few others, but I haven't gotten to
I've been trying to get to the noses. I've watched Sweat, and I haven't gotten as deep as I wish I have. But from what I saw, I'll kind of give you my preview thoughts. No one hold me to this because it could change with more games I watched or maybe just a fresh watch, tomorrow or something. But humongous, looks the part tremendously. I think that if you asked Sweat whether he was a nose or a 3-tech, he would say he's a 3-tech. Yeah. Just based off his play. That's kind of the player I'm sitting there watching. Or if he played 3-tech, it's I would be sitting there asking him, do you think you're a 3-tech or edge? And then he would be like, I'm an edge. He's one of those guys. Great movement for his size because he is a mammoth in the middle, right? And I think his hands are special from the nose. And I think he brings some in the pass rush that you don't see from just your down-to-down nose in the NFL. He brings more in that capacity. Mm-hmm. But I first need you to be dominant against the run, and I think he's good, but I don't know if he's dominant.
Yeah. It's one of those. So as for I just want to put this out there for the nose 3-tech argument. It would I swear, if a team tries to move, if the team makes him lose weight, I'd be very frustrated. It reminds me a lot of what the Cowboys did to Mozzie Smith this year, where Mozzie Smith was just a tank, like one of the strongest humans I feel like I've seen come through the draft process. And the Cowboys were like, you should drop 20 pounds. And they tried playing him at 3-tech, and it was like, dude. So that would be my response if the Broncos took Devondre Sweat, who, as you've said, is just like King Kong at nose tackle, and we're like, let's have you slim down and play like Jane a little bit. That would frustrate me. But
he kind of already played. Like, anyways, continue. Sorry.
Let's go maybe by position group. How's that sound?
I want to go tackle. I want to hit on.
Let's talk about these tackles.
I haven't watched the Oregon State tackle much yet. I've heard tremendous things about him, so I'm excited to watch him. I want to highlight Jason.
Let's talk about these three: Fountaino, Mims, and Latham. Because I feel like we've watched those three a little bit.
Yes. Okay. JC Latham, I think he has the most power out of any of these tackles in this draft. I think he projects well as a tackle or a guard in the NFL. Although he's a little lengthy for a guard. Like, you can kind of look at someone's build and be like, can he scooch inside? And Latham is kind of questionable, but I look at, okay, he's like 340 pounds. Like, he's a humongous human being. Mm-hmm. I think he could, especially with his power. I saw in pass pro, I think was a little more sketchy than the run. He kind of lunges sometimes, which gets people, that kind of just gets him out of place. It was hit or miss for him in pass pro, but ultimately has really good traits to develop there. And I think he's day one ready in the run. Also a really good athlete. JC Latham is. I think he fits multiple schemes, but just with his power skill set, it's like, get him in a gap run scheme and let him mull some people down. I do like JC Latham. For the Broncos, it's interesting because I'm sitting here thinking about it. And do the Broncos have an available spot on their offensive line day one? Unless they go out there and play hardball with Garrett Bowles, probably not. But is that the worst thing in the world? I personally don't think so. I think that if you can save yourself, people could be complaining about year one production, but a year from now, if we don't have to go give Mike McGlinchey another contract, right? Because another version of Mike McGlinchey a contract to fill your left tackle spot, you probably won't be complaining 4 years from now. So I think offensive line ultimately is very, very, very much in the realm of possibility. And that's especially because Sean Payton likes taking offensive linemen early, whether they need it or not right then. So I think ultimately, if I were a betting man, Frankie, I honestly probably would put my bet on that offensive line as the Broncos' first pick this year.
Yeah. Latham and Mims are such Sean Payton picks that I think that they would be awesome. As for the Garrett Bowles situation, so I actually, in my mind, and this is if I were a betting man, I would probably put my money that Bowles won't be here next year. That's just my little prediction. I don't think he is going to be here. But if he was, so let's say he wasn't, I still don't know if Latham has never played left. I don't think he is a left, and I don't think a lot of his traits translate well towards moving to the left side. Like, he's not, like you said, his movement isn't as crazy as you'd like if you're being like, all right, you got to completely flip your mechanics. Same for Mims, where these are kind of pure right tackles. But again, I think as you highlighted, I don't care. I think as we all kind of saw from Mike McGlinchey this year, who cares? If in a year from now, they're like, get out of here, we got a first round pick from last year, we want to try, do it. Like, I'm completely okay with that. To me, JC Latham is in that tier one of tackles. Like, I wouldn't say he's on the same tier as Alt and Fashanu, but like, he's like in 1B. He's that good to me. His grip strength is ridiculous. Again, when we talk about what a Sean Payton offensive tackle is going to be, same with Mims. They are get off the bus guys. They look like they're, especially when we talk about who Zach Strief is, this 6'8", 330-pound monster. These are the kind of guys that I think he is like handmade to develop. So I think it'd be very exciting, especially, and we've talked about this a ton, and this is probably something that, like, just because I'm a sicko, when we talk about, Quinn Bailey got, I don't know, like 70, 80 snaps this year as the tackle eligible as the third tackle. And, no knock to Quinn Bailey. He wasn't great at it. The Broncos were not an efficient running game when they went jumbo. You swap out Quinn Bailey with JC Latham or Amarius Mims.
Oh, my God.
That shit's going to get a lot more effective real quick. So that would be like, that's, I guess, the world I'm living in where, man, like, if you're saying, but it is, I guess, the issue where you're not asking Mike to switch to the left side. You're not, and again, I don't
so
think
I do have, Frankie, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do have a different kind of opinion on Mims. I think that Mims is such a ball of clay that there's a chance that he could play left tackle.
Okay.
I think that, like, I haven't seen him. I mean, Mims is a guy, I think he trumps everybody in the tackle class as an athlete and just pure, like, if I'm looking at you, you're an NFL tackle, right? Like the God-gifted talents. I don't think there's a guy like him.
How Kingsley tests. No, but I'm sorry.
Kingsley, yes, Kingsley's another one as well. And so is this Arizona tackle, Jordan Morgan. But Mims is just a freak, humongous mountain of a man, moves really well for his size. I think that there is a possibility that if a team wanted him to, he could switch to left tackle, because I'm not dealing with a guy that has a ton of reps at all, just like at pure right tackle. How much is it different to switch him to left tackle? Because do I, in any system or any coordinator or like any franchise, is it ideal to play Mims year one in my scheme? Probably not. That's what I would say. It's probably not ideal. But he still will get drafted there because people will see the lottery ticket and the investment in him. If he develops, he can turn into this. How much do we like Zach Strief is the question with this pick for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just wanted to highlight too. I mean, as you're saying, Amarius Mims, ball of clay. This guy that hasn't even, like, this is probably right around 800 total college snaps, all at right tackle in his career. So in his 3 seasons at Georgia, he has played less snaps than J.C. Latham has just this year. You know, so I mean, that's also both something you can use as, hey, we haven't, you know, there's a lot of, it's the mystery box thing where, hey, he could be a good tackle, but it's also a bit of a red flag because I guess, you know, are you willing to burn your only top 50, top 75 selection on a guy who's only played 800 snaps in 3 years? What would you got?
I want to add one more thing. I want to know if this is like J.C. Latham also is the guy that is getting other teams, college football teams, in trouble right now, coming clean on. They tried to recruit me in the off season, and he's pretty much snitching on everybody right now. I don't know if that plays
a part. It's the type of locker room cancer we want in Denver, Joey.
I don't know if that plays a part in your evaluation, but worth noting. He's getting teams in trouble. He's getting teams in trouble right now. I think I'm forgetting what teams it was. I think it was like Tennessee and Florida State. If someone knows in the chat, please let me know. But J.C. Latham is that guy. Who else we want to highlight here?
QBs or receivers we want to talk about? I'm trying to think if there's a receiver. Brian Thomas. Would you take Brian Thomas at 12?
It would be like one of my last resorts, but I think I might. But I'd
consider it back. Very big. It is purely dependent on your belief in Kiri Colbert, who is the Broncos receiver coach. But from what we've seen, I think in his ability to kind of develop these supreme athletes at the receiver position through his time at USC, I would be pretty interested in kind of seeing what he could do with a ball of clay like Brian Thomas, who is just an absurd size, speed, you know, just purely vertical, or not purely vertical, but like his trajectory right now is just going so up. And I have, when you talk about the top receivers in this class, I think he's right up there with him, with just the fact that, like, man, this is a guy who's still only 21 years old. Again, I mentioned the size speed combo. He has a lot of like nuances to his route running and has some decent ability as a 3-level route runner. He's decent after the catch. He can do so many different things when pushing guys vertical and get on top of corners. He's great in the air. Like, he reminds me a lot as funny as it sounds, he reminds me of more of like a more juiced up Cortland Sutton or Nico Collins, who we've seen this year kind of explode. And I mean,
how big is he, Frankie?
He's 6'4",
205. I watch a ton of LSU this year because they have so many players, and just watching them in passing based off defensive players they've watched. I haven't sat down and watched more than 2 games of Brian Thomas, solely focusing on Brian Thomas so far. So you do think that he's worth this pick possibly?
I think he's, depending upon how he tests, which based on how he looks on tape, I think is going to be really well. The numbers he put up, the age he is. And I mean, like, I don't know if he's gonna last that long, like not last that long, but I really do like when you talk about what makes guys these top 15 receivers, top 20 receivers. I mean, we see how many receivers go early every single year now. Like, I don't know, man. I have a hard time looking at a guy who just put up 12 touchdowns, 1,300 yards. He has, again, he's 6'4", 205. He runs like a gazelle. He does so many things that I'm just kind of like, man, like it's hard for when I talk myself more into it. It's kind of like, man, I can understand why he would be. There's not a lot of things where I'm like, this guy shouldn't be,
Yeah. I'll sit down and watch him more for the chat. So everybody, we'll come back on here.
And
we're going to do a bunch of one-off videos on these, on this draft stuff too. I want to at least. And I think Frankie's down as well. He's told me.
Yeah, of course.
And so, yeah, I want to do a bunch of draft videos this offseason. So if you guys are down for it, let me know in the chat.
Let me rapid fire some questions at you. How does that sound?
Okay, go.
Any QB you'd take at 12?
No, based off my viewing. I want to say though, JJ McCarthy's better and he's going to go higher than people think he is. I think that JJ McCarthy, a lot of people talk about, hey, these guys develop really bad traits in college. I don't think JJ McCarthy has a lot of bad traits developed in college. I think a lot of people will sit there, everyone loved Trey Lance at the third pick. JJ McCarthy has more than doubled the amount of passing attempts Trey Lance did in college. I think if you're talking about a guy that is you're talking about JJ McCarthy. If you're talking about an athlete and those different things where I don't know why he's viewed different than I've seen. This is what I'll say about JJ McCarthy. I see every single year these guys come out and they're like, we need that quarterback who can run, throw hard, and all like these God-gifted talent things. I don't know why they're off of JJ McCarthy now. This is not me giving JJ McCarthy my biggest endorsement. I'm letting you know why he's going to be drafted higher than I think people think he will. I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't make it out of the top 15. Not at all. That's just something I want to throw out there.
All right, next rapid fire question, and you might not have an answer to this because it's early. Who's your edge one right now?
I haven't gotten too far. I think it's Jared Verse though. Right now is my edge one. Where do you think?
So there, I see. So we've got some Dallas Turner comments. So I'm gonna probably upset this person a little bit. Dallas Turner right now is probably my edge 3. So he's behind, and this is gonna sound a little bit like. What's the word? I don't know. Leitu Latu is probably the best pure pass rusher in this class. The things he does with his hands are awesome. He has a lot of jump off the snap. I like Leitu a lot. The problem with Leitu is he has a lot of medical red flags, so he will probably get it knocked down. But because I am a guy who watches a lot of film and not a doctor, I am going to have Leitu as above him. Behind him, you said it, Jared Verse. Jared Verse is just sick. The way Jared Verse plays the run, he has go-to pass rush moves. He is so strong off the snap. I saw him get comped to Lamar Woodley the other day. Like, he is a truly like a very old school edge. And I think a big thing that's boosting it for me with him is he is kind of the exact type of edge that Denver needs this year. If you were to have him rotating, and then if you had him and then on the other side, you have a rotation of Bonito, Browning, that's a very explosive combo. He will get a lot of those pressures that result in sacks for the other guy, I think, throughout his career. So I agree, Jared Verse, I think I have as my second guy. And then, Dallas Turner is right there at 3. Dallas Turner, very good all-around player, very well-rounded talent. There weren't a lot of things I disliked about him. The only thing that I'd say, the reason I liked a lot of these other guys more is I liked them more. They had traits and things they did that I saw as truly elite things, truly things that I could bang home on and be like, this is what this guy brings to the table. Yes, there was a lot of good stuff Dallas Turner brings to the table. He has good hands. Excuse me. Good technique, good athleticism. Nothing great or elite, though, in my opinion. And I think when you talk about a guy and a big thing that I think is going to help people and help his grade, he's still only 20. So this is a guy that I think people are kind of drafting for what he can become, which is fine. That's definitely going to push him up boards, and that's definitely a reason I think he probably ends up being a good 15 or a top 15, top 10 pick, whatever he ends up being. For me personally, though, I'm just really a fan of these truly established guys that I'm already like, this is already like a solidified pro guy, which is what I see in Verse and Letu, who have room to grow, versus Turner, who I see as a good pro right now. But I don't know. I see more of a road to development needed for Dallas Turner, who I think will also maybe need to put on a little bit of weight than I do for these other guys. So that's the reason I have them a little bit higher. So that was my Dallas Turner tangent.
Okay. I largely agree with you. I think in a normal year, I don't think Dallas Turner ultimately is your edge one. Like, forget how last year, is he your edge one or anywhere close to it? Like that's kind of the point here. I think Dallas Turner does have a lot of untapped potential there. And I think he continued to get better. I think he has a lot of God-gifted those things that you can't teach talent about him. I just don't know. Like, here's a question for you, Frankie.
Yeah.
We both covered the draft this year, and I really love this player. Dallas Turner or Jalen Phillips as prospects?
Jalen Phillips.
That's where I agree. Like Jaleel Phillips, like that's what I'm talking about. Like these guys were players.
See, I've been doing that with. See, I did this. How about this? Jermaine Johnson. He went like 11th.
Yeah, probably Jermaine Johnson.
I'd take Jermaine Johnson, right? Where it's like these guys, these edges that have been these top 15, top 12 picks. I'm not saying Dallas Turner is. Well, I guess I am. I don't think Dallas Turner is quite on those guys' level, and that's not a knock on him. He's still a very good player. But I think he's getting a little bit of a bump because last year we saw Will Anderson be a true generational edge prospect.
Yeah.
And now it's the next year. So obviously Alabama has to have another great defensive star. And Dallas Turner is probably the second top 2, top 3 player on that defense. Maybe top 4 because actually their safety is really good too. I don't know. That's tough. But like that's, I guess, I think he's getting a little bit of boost because he plays for the Blue Blood Alabama. And they just had a guy go top 3 who ended up being like a quote generational edge rusher. So that's, I guess, where I am with Dallas Turner. I guess that's all I wanted to say was I think he is on, I'd say, the tier of Jared Verse and Latu. And I feel like I see a lot of people being like, he's a top 10 pick while these other guys are like top 25 picks. I want to be like, they're very much similar players to me, at least.
Guys, if you guys are in the chat right now, I'm going to fire off one more to Frankie. And if you guys have any more comments or questions you guys want to get off just on the draft in general, Frankie and I will let you know if we watched them yet. And if we have not, I will put them on the top of my list and I'll have them ready for next show. So if you guys have any questions, fire them off in the chat right now. The last player I'm going to throw at Frankie, though, is just Brock Bowers. I'm laughing because if you guys heard the conversation Frankie and I had before the show on Brock Bowers, it was hilarious. And it wasn't because the quality of player, I think we agree there. It's just on the idea that maybe he falls to 12 and then versus Frankie doesn't think he doesn't at all. What are your thoughts on Brock Bowers, though?
If Brock Bowers is available at the 12th overall pick, George Payton and Sean Payton, whoever's got the card, they should be at the podium before the prior pick ends. Before the 11th pick has been announced, they should have that card ready, just in case the 11th pick also is a big. Guys, Brock Bowers is one of the best offensive weapons in this class, period. Like, he's a top 4 to 5 prospect. And, there are concerns, obviously. There's people who are, it's drafting a tight end. Guys, he is so much more than that. He's a tight end. He's an H-back. He's a guy you can split out as an F. He's a guy you could have lined up all the way outside. This is a guy that is just an offensive chess piece that has put up consistent, very elite production. Like, one of the true blue chip prospects in this class. If he ends up slipping a little bit because teams aren't, like, I guess here's the biggest point, or here's the biggest argument for me for why the Broncos should be one of the teams to highly consider Brock Bowers. You have Sean Payton. Let me say it one more time. You have Sean Payton. There is arguably no coach in NFL history that has been as good at utilizing players with unique skill sets. And Brock Bowers doesn't even have that unique of a skill set. He just has an incredible skill set. Yeah, has an incredible skill set. Guys, Brock Bowers can play tight end for Denver next year. He can line up as their H-back. He can line up in the slot. He can just be a weapon in this passing game. He can be a great weapon in the screen game. He's not the best blocker, but he can grow into that role. Like, he could be such a great piece for this team to have as a weapon over the middle, which they've lacked this past couple of years. Even though Russ has been very, very poor at throwing the ball over the middle, they have also just not had great weapons to target over the middle of the field the past couple of years. Brock Bowers could be that. Oh. Take Brock Bowers if he's there.
Guys, chat, do you think that Brock Bowers could fall the 12th pick, yes or no? I'll leave my little argument right here. I mean, I have nothing else to add to Frankie's point. I think he's tremendous. I just don't think – I think NFL teams will overthink the tight end thing. I think that's a possibility at least. Am I putting a high possibility on it? No. I'm saying maybe like a 25% chance he falls there is where I would land on it. I just look at it, and I'm like, okay, the Falcons are there. They're not going to draft a tight end. I think the Titans have bigger needs. They'll draft tackle. Do the Jets draft a tight end? Like, I don't know. I go through these, and I'm like, I don't know. I could definitely see arguments of just one team being like, I need cornerback.
The Jets could totally take Brock Bowers. That would be a kind of a crazy fit. They need the offensive line too, though.
Yeah, or I could see any of these teams, like, it only takes like one of these edge rushers or one of these cornerbacks sneaking up in there, and now the Broncos have Brock Bowers sitting in their lap at 12. That's all I'm saying. I like we're early. What if one of these guys has a crazy combine? We see that every year, and now all of a sudden they're high up. I think there's a possibility. Is it a strong possibility? No. But I do think it's a possibility. And to echo all of Frankie's comments, if he's there, I think that it would be warranted. I don't think that you are drafting your biggest need because he's filling multiple of them. I think he's filling multiple needs. I think he's kind of a utility player for the Broncos. You can play him in multiple roles, and he could be awesome in a lot of them. So I think he would be perfect with Sean Payton in the offense he's trying to run down here.
Yeah. And I mean, the last point I'd make about it is like, I mean, when we talk, we'll get into this a lot, obviously, but like when we talk about what I'd say we want the strategy to be for this draft and even this offseason as a whole, build as good of a nest as possible for whatever the next quarterback is, whether that's a swing on a quarterback in 2025, whether they make a swing on a quarterback this year, whether there's a free agent next year, whatever. Make as good of a nest as possible. And that is why I am such a proponent of going receiver, offensive tackle, one of these true weapons, or even bolstering up the defensive front, because I think those will be things that will actually aid that rookie quarterback or that quarterback's transition or development so much. I think that could be truly like one of those franchise altering moves where if you go Brock Bowers this year or, one of the top receivers this year, maybe a Brian Thomas, and then next year you end up taking the Shador or the Carson Beck or the whatever quarterback launches his way up a draft board next year. Then you already have that premium quarterback number one ace target combo. And that's what the NFL's built on right now. You think about what like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are. You think about what like Mahomes and Kelsey have been. You need that combination of that two-piece, that two-man game, and I think if Denver has the opportunity to get one of those pieces this offseason, they have to swing on it. Even if it's a quarterback and Sean Payton decides he really likes a quarterback. If Sean Payton says, I really like this quarterback this year, do it. Do it.
I agree. I totally agree. I 1,000% agree. I think if Sean Payton likes one of the quarterbacks, that trumps all. Yeah. And then you kind of go off of what's the best offensive player I can kind of get here. And luckily for the Broncos, it's loaded for offense at the top. Yep. So I think that they're going to be able to get a solid player if their evaluations are correct in offensive players there. So, yeah, I think that's all for today, guys. I want to shout out. I'm going to the Senior Bowl at the end of this month. If you guys have any questions and you guys – DM me at JR Drafts because I know you listen to the podcast. I'll make sure to pay attention to it at the Senior Bowl. I'll message you guys back or I'll bring it up on the podcast, one of the two. So just let me know what question you guys want answered, and I'll figure it out for you there. I'll make a point of it. Frankie, where can they find your work, man?
Frankie's Film. You can find us on here doing our little pod spizzle on every Thursday. But yeah, those are the two spots.
Perfect, guys. Yeah, and follow him at Frankie Films. That's me at JR Drafts. That's on X or Twitter or whatever you call it. Make sure you guys are subscribing to Let's Talk Broncos. Frankie and I go live every Thursday. But until next time, go Broncos.